The moment my wife wrapped her arms around me at the arrival's gate, every lonely night of the past 6 months disappeared. I could feel her trembling as she buried her face against my shoulder, and in the quietest voice, she whispered, "I missed you." For one perfect heartbeat, the airport noise faded away, and it felt like home had finally returned. But before I could even tell her how much I'd missed her too, another man calmly picked up her suitcase, smiled at her, and started walking away as if it belonged to him. My wife glanced at him with an expression I couldn't understand, then looked back at me with tears still in her eyes. In that single moment, love, confusion, fear, and doubt collided, and I realized that sometimes the biggest storms begin in the middle of what should have been the happiest reunion. Before we continue, if you believe that kindness, forgiveness, and second chances can change lives, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment sharing where you're watching from, share this story with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to the channel for more emotional stories that remind us why compassion always matters. 6 months earlier, my wife Emily had accepted a temporary humanitarian assignment overseas as a pediatric nurse. We had spent nearly 12 years building a quiet life together. We never owned a mansion or drove expensive cars, but our little house was filled with laughter, weekend breakfasts, movie nights, and dreams about finally starting a family. Her work had always been more than just a profession. It was her calling. She had held frightened children through surgeries, comforted exhausted parents, and somehow always returned home with enough love left to brighten my hardest days. When she received the opportunity to help children in another country suffering after a devastating earthquake, I knew I couldn't ask her to stay. Loving someone sometimes means standing behind the dreams that temporarily take them away from you. The months apart tested both of us more than either had expected. Time zones stole conversations. Internet connections failed during important moments. Holidays became lonely dinners with empty chairs across the table. Every night I counted the weeks until her return while throwing myself into work as an architect. I renovated schools during the day and returned to a silent house every evening. The only thing that kept me going was the promise that eventually, she'd walk through those airport doors and everything would finally feel normal again. That day had finally arrived. I had flowers in one hand and tears already forming before her flight even landed. When Emily appeared through the sliding glass doors, she looked thinner, more exhausted, and older than when she had left, yet somehow even more beautiful. She ran straight into my arms without hesitation. That hug carried 6 months of loneliness, fear, relief, and love. It was everything I'd imagined. Until I noticed the man. He wasn't much older than us, dressed simply, carrying himself with quiet confidence. Without asking anyone, he reached for Emily's rolling suitcase and continued walking toward the exit. Emily didn't stop him. She simply watched him for a second before looking back at me with eyes filled with complicated emotions. My stomach tightened. Every terrible possibility flashed through my mind. Had she met someone else? Had 6 months changed everything between us? Why would another man carry her luggage while I stood there holding flowers like a stranger? I followed them through the crowded terminal, trying to understand what was happening without making a scene. Emily gently took my hand as we walked outside. She squeezed it tightly, almost as though she knew exactly what I was thinking. Still, she remained unusually quiet. The mysterious man placed her suitcase beside a parked van before turning toward us. Then something happened that completely shattered every assumption I had made. Instead of introducing himself proudly, the man embraced me with gratitude in his eyes. His name was Daniel. Through tears, he explained that 6 months earlier he had nearly lost his 7-year-old daughter beneath the collapsed remains of their apartment building after the earthquake. Rescue workers had managed to pull the little girl out alive, but she suffered severe infections and life-threatening injuries. Hospitals were overwhelmed, and doctors believed she wouldn't survive. Emily had refused to give up on her. Long after her scheduled shifts ended, she stayed beside the child every evening, reading stories, changing bandages, encouraging physical therapy, and reminding a frightened little girl that someone believed she would live. Daniel admitted that there had been many nights when he himself had nearly surrendered to hopelessness. Emily never allowed it. She quietly paid for medicine when supplies ran short, organized donations from other volunteers, and convinced specialists to continue treating children who had no money. She had never mentioned any of this to me because she believed kindness lost its meaning when performed for recognition. Daniel opened the van's side door. Sitting inside was his daughter, Sophia, smiling brightly while holding a handmade drawing. She carefully climbed out with only a slight limp before running toward Emily. The little girl hugged her tightly before walking over to me and handing me the drawing. It showed Emily standing beside a hospital bed while a little girl reached toward the sun. Above them, written in uneven handwriting, were simple words that instantly brought tears to my eyes: "She gave me tomorrow." Daniel explained that he had insisted on carrying Emily's suitcase because, in his culture, it was one small way of honoring someone who had carried his family's burdens for months. He had driven 3 hours simply to thank the woman who had saved his daughter's life. He wanted to make sure she arrived home knowing that an entire family would forever consider her part of theirs. Standing there in the airport parking lot, I felt ashamed of how quickly fear had replaced trust inside my heart. I had allowed one confusing moment to erase 12 years of knowing exactly who my wife was. Emily hadn't returned home with another love. She had returned carrying invisible scars from witnessing suffering that few people could imagine. The exhaustion in her eyes wasn't guilt. It was the weight of children she couldn't save mixed with gratitude for those she could. During the drive home, she finally spoke about the nights she cried herself to sleep after losing patients, the mothers who hugged her because they had no words left, and the volunteers who became family far from home. She confessed that coming home frightened her because she wasn't the same person who had left. Pain changes people, but compassion changes them even more. Over the following weeks, our home slowly found its rhythm again. We laughed over burnt pancakes, argued about whose turn it was to do laundry, and planted flowers in the front yard together. Yet something inside both of us had shifted forever. Inspired by Daniel and Sophia, we began organizing annual fundraising events for children's hospitals and disaster relief organizations. Friends joined us. Neighbors donated. What started as one family's gratitude slowly became an entire community choosing kindness over indifference. Months later, a package arrived from overseas. Inside was another drawing from Sophia. This time it showed 3 people standing together beneath an airport sign. Above them were the words, "Some people arrive carrying luggage. Others arrive carrying hope." If this story has touched your heart so far, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone you love, subscribe for more inspiring stories, and let us know in the comments how kindness has changed your own life. Your support helps these stories reach people who may need hope today. Before the story ends, tell us in the comments, have you ever misunderstood someone, only to discover their heart was even more beautiful than you imagined? As I framed Sophia's drawing and hung it beside our front door, I realized that airports aren't just places where journeys end or begin. Sometimes they're where trust is tested, assumptions are broken, and ordinary people discover that the greatest acts of love often happen quietly, without applause or recognition. My wife came home carrying the same suitcase she had left with, but inside her heart she carried countless lives she had touched. And in learning the truth behind one misunderstood moment, I discovered that the strongest marriages are not built on never having doubts, they are built on choosing trust, compassion, and love when the truth finally comes into the light. That day at the airport didn't reveal another man stealing my wife away. It revealed how one woman's kindness had quietly changed a family's future forever, and in doing so, reminded me that the greatest heroes are often the ones who never ask to be seen.